Hi, folks. So, again, what a treat. Thank you so much to all the artists, and thank you all for staying with us. And we're going to have a nice little conversation. You know, for me, I like Q&As to not so much be Q&As, but more conversations, really. It's really about kind of a mini journey of discovery of each other, of ourselves, and, you know, kind of a reflective thing. So, also knowing, and it was rude of me earlier I completely forgot because it's just too many things in my head. Of course, this is the final event in this beautiful weekend of 3 days of the University of Massachusetts Amherst Bach Festival and Symposium. Who among the audience came specifically for the festival or symposium? Anyone? Okay, a few hands. Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome to UMass. And of course, the UMass Music and Dance Department, our co-hosts, co-presenters, and of course the primary presenters, producers of the festival. So thank you to the department for doing this with us. I'm not going to, no need to bore you with recounting the amazing, you know, essentially CVs, credits, histories of our illustrious guests. You have the programs. You can, if you don't know their credits already, you can read up. So I'm going to kind of jump right in. Given that it's a Bach, also this weekend it's a Bach Festival and Symposium, but as you can see, you just listened and experienced a gorgeous program that was sort of Bach and also very much not. I'm curious from each of our guests how, you know, what your journey has been as artists, as musicians, as individuals. You know, what you were, I curated them into this festival, into this event, but you also accepted. And so I'm curious from your perspective, you know, how did you get here, and what does it mean for you to be, you know, part of an event like this?
Hi. Okay, it's on. Hello. Let's see. Well, I mean, I was grateful to be part of this program. Thank you, Michael, for inviting me and Texu. And yeah, when Michael asked me to be a part of a Bach Symposium Festival, I thought to myself, what is the Bach that I love the most? And while they're all, you know, Bach wrote a lot of great pieces, obviously, but one piece that came to my mind was the C major fugue, which is has been sort of like I've, you know, learned it a long time ago. I've played it a lot, but it's also a piece that's monumental, and it's very big. It's long, and it's also kind of makes the violinist do like I don't know, like jumping jacks on the violin. So, but aside from the jumping jacks, I love playing it. I think it's a joyful piece. He was thinking about this chorale that talks about the Holy Spirit. It's in 3 parts, and it has, you know, the words to the chorale are this kind of like, "Come, O Holy Spirit." It's about joy. It's about lifting. So I just wanted to play it, and then I asked, because Michael had said, well, you know, what can we do with the Bach? How can we present it in an interesting way? And I thought, well, I've been really loving playing and also listening to Texu Kim's compositions, so I asked him whether he would be able to write a piece for me. What I didn't expect was that he was going to write a piece that kind of put its music inside the fugue. So as you heard, the fugue is continuous, but he asked me to split up the fugue, and he puts his second part of his piece in the middle of it. And I actually had to kind of relearn the Bach. I had to relearn the fugue when he sent me the piece just about, a few months ago. And that experience has been also very interesting. I had to kind of look, I think that the Bach, rather than Texu's music kind of adding to the Bach, I felt like it was doing both. Like Bach was adding to Texu's piece, and Texu's piece was adding to the Bach. So it was this dialogue that happened, and it needed to. It had to happen in the way that he wrote it. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, it was an interesting kind of way to practice.
Okay. Hi. I'm so grateful to be here, and I think it's natural for me to answer Hyeyung's comment. So I was just thrilled about this commission, and I was honored to have a chance to work with her and to be presented here. And I happen to love the same piece by Bach. When I learned the violin when I was very young, I was not talented or persistent enough to learn this piece masterfully like she did, but I really wanted to play this piece when I was young, so I remember I played it on the piano. Just wanted to see how it would sound if I just do it correctly without any mistake. So, and then when Hyeyung chose this piece, so I was very thrilled that I can work on this piece. But also I had to think about the presenter being Asian American Center. So how can it make sense? How can having a Bach and me, in terms of Asian diaspora, we talked about in the beginning of the discussion, would make sense. And I love those kind of things. I'm a good puzzler, and whenever I get commissions, I ask as many criteria they can give me, because it's kind of solving puzzle, and that may come with my background in chemistry. So because, I majored in chemistry not because I was so into science, but I just so loved solving the problem, and getting a good grade. So it's still there, and that's how. Yeah, that's who I am in a way. And so at the same time, my science background gave me the idea about creativity almost equaling invention. It doesn't have to be. There are so many beautiful music that is not necessarily provocative. But for some reason, I had to be something different when I do something. So that's one of the reasons why I came up with splitting Bach, because that would be something new, I just assumed. And I'm so thankful that Hyeyung agreed to do it and then relearn the Bach. But I grew up in South Korea. I became American citizen, but I grew up in South Korea. But the Western culture was always interspersed in me. And it's just wherever I go, there is sometimes Bach's music, there is sometimes Korean music, there is pop music, jazz music. I loved jazz when I was younger. I wanted to become a jazz musician. I failed again. So, but it's kind of where we are now. I think everything is seamlessly you experience. Sometimes it comes with cuts, but I think that's one of the images I wanted to recreate through this project. And it was extremely difficult, actually, because how to make it the transition. So I had to rely on much on the performer's creativity. And again, this has been a great joy to be here.
Let's see, Bach and me. So I went on a little diatribe in this little radio interview we did the other day, because often as contemporary artists, and particularly contemporary music makers in the West, we are constantly being asked to help make sense of our presence in relation to the so-called great composers and great artists of the Western canon. And so I could say, yeah, Bach his music played a role in my life too. And I could also say, big deal. Look, because it's like we have been fed this in a way. Uncritically, we are constantly told that Bach is not only the greatest composer of all time, but maybe the first great composer of all time. And also, I, as somebody who makes music in a lot of different ways, including in real time, am constantly told that Bach improvised too, although we have no trace of this anywhere, only accounts that supposedly it happened. And so actually Bach stands at the beginning of the split between, in the West, what is valued as composition and what is devalued as improvisation. So we put him on this pedestal to kind of organize our understanding of Western music. And I just didn't really want to do that. So I wanted to put somebody else on a pedestal, which is what I did with my piece, Plinth, a pedestal for someone entirely other than Bach, who should be central to our understanding of history and the world. And I confess that I'm still on my journey of learning about him and about my indebtedness to him, and also to my own caste privilege that gave me the trajectory that I have had in the West. So this was kind of an excuse for me to sort of unseat Bach as the center of our world and instead recenter it around somebody who has historically been placed on the margins. So that's the beginning of my answer. I could also talk about voice leading and counterpoint and stuff like that, but that seems somehow less significant at the moment.
You probably had lots of. There was probably plenty of counterpoint conversation yesterday at the Symposium, so I think they've got their fill. So let's maybe crack that egg open a little more. So the canon, as both of you or all of you have either stated directly or indirectly just now, for there to even be a canon, there has to be a rationale, there has to be a motivation, right? The canon is not only a value, but it's a value to a position. There's a power dynamic embedded in that. So what I'm curious, for among the three of you, as folks who navigate, who circulate in this world that we label classical music, Western classical music, and then Vijay, you mentioned contemporary music. There's this whole stream of terms: classical new music, contemporary music, etc. But what does it mean really in a lived way, for each of you, as artists, as music makers, as creators, as people, in this society? We're all active here in the U.S., and so what does it mean to be operate within and without the Western gaze? And what does it mean to center or decenter or recenter, the various voices, the various vernaculars, the various truths, within yourself? Maybe I'm just curious about going a little deeper into that for any of you.
Yeah, I can start. I think that my relationship with the canon is evolving, and it has been evolving for all of my life. So, when I was younger, I mean, when you're doing like Suzuki violin, or, in my case, when I immigrated from Korea, South Korea at the age of 7 with immigrant parents who were, too busy to set up lessons and, do all that because they were busy, like, running their dry cleaning business and, all of that. And, but, they were able to, search out teachers and search out schools that I can take lessons in. When you're young, you're just kind of doing what the teacher tells you, and you learn the Suzuki songs, from Twinkle and onward. And then, I kept practicing and working on it, and I somehow got into the Juilliard School and did my undergrad there. And I think that, in that experience, my relationship with the canon was very close. It was always, just like always there. It was the most important thing. My mentors, my teachers were teaching me exactly how, the great violinists in the past have played, and they, passed down that knowledge, fingerings, bowings, and all those things down to me. And then, once I graduated, I joined a string quartet. I joined the Chiara String Quartet, and we spent 18 years playing together in that group. And, our relationship with the canon also was evolving. It changes. But in the 18-year career that we had, we were, looking kind of towards our mentors, the Juilliard String Quartet, the many string quartets, the Takash, all these string quartets that have coached us, and we were kind of following their footsteps. And in terms of like how it's lived, in terms of gigs and concerts, and actually with the Chiara String Quartet, we commissioned a lot of composers, and we played a lot of different kinds of music that were being created right now. But we were playing mostly in chamber music series around the country that wanted to hear, wanted to make sure that there was, Haydn on the program, or Mozart on the program, or Beethoven, Brahms, things that people consider in the canon and things that people are familiar with. And then let's try to program this new piece that we commissioned from our friend that we really, really want to play. Can you program it, please? And then sometimes the answer was no, sometimes the answer was yes, oftentimes it was no. So I think that, that was my relationship with the canon. And now, as I'm kind of looking forward to my future, I joined another string quartet just this spring called the Del Sol Quartet, which does mostly new music. And my relation with the canon is I'm taking a break. I'm taking a break from it, and which is really freeing, and which is amazing. And this is the time in my life where I get to do that. And I think that, I have many friends who are amazing artists who are in relationship with the canon intensely all the time, and they're also doing it in their way that's true to who they are, and they're doing amazing things with it too. But I think that, I think everybody has their own path, and it shouldn't be dictated by anybody else, I guess, right? So, yeah, stop there.
Any other thoughts?
So, do you want to go first? Okay. I just don't want to make a pattern, but I'm going to be, again, the second person to talk about it. I have so much thought about this, but I will try to be organized as much as possible. when I began dreaming about becoming a composer, my idea was, I'm going to write something so that I'm going to be the next Beethoven. You know, I was very naive, and that was just a natural thinking because that's what I know about composers, right? And also, one of my teachers, her name is Eun-Suk Chin, and she is very close to be a canon, I think. She's making a history at this point, and that didn't really help me to get away from all the pressure that I have to be like that. But at the same time, I began learning there have been so many different other composers that I have never heard of, or sometimes it's because of my lack of knowledge, sometimes because canon is different from culture to culture, and from school to school, from the teacher to teacher. And usually canon comes from some sort of teachers. It could be YouTube, it could be some random YouTube lecturer saying, this is important piece, and then it could become a canon. And the reason why people need canon is to keep the industry going on. I happen to read a book called The Birth of Audience, and then it comes with interesting concept that audience, the concept of audience in concert hall does not exist in many different cultures. For example, Korean culture, concert hall is outdoors very often, if you do it authentic or historic way. And also in Western culture, the concept of audience, separation between audience and the composer or the musicians was basically the remnant of, I'm trying to be a little provocative, I'm probably not correct, but it's how they wanted to sell the music, like scores and tickets to the audience in around Beethoven's time. Beethoven was the first hero. Bach, I'm not sure how Bach imagined about himself being canon. Beethoven, I think he was aware of it because the surroundings worshipped him. So I have so many complex thinkings about canon, and I'm conflicted. Sometimes I pursue the same thing. I want to write the greatest piece, well, at least as much as I can. And sometimes, you know, it's never going to happen. Why do I bother? And then sometimes, you know, I get inspired by more or less living, striving great composers like Vijay right here. And at the same time, it's just too overwhelming. Sometimes, if I have time, I would look for so many other canons before I write the same instrument, piece with the same instrumentation, just to avoid copying them. This time, I just decided to give it up. I just wanted to give the highlight to Bach in a way. I just wanted to, I wanted to contest, but that's just good enough. And I don't dare to take glory away. Maybe in 10 years I may be different. I will just take all the glory again. But I think that was the right choice, and then I wanted to be different from my own self this time. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Great points you've made, and I echo that in the sense of all of this being an invention in a certain, and very recent. So, like historicizing the whole idea of the composer as this great figure, like the author, or the playwright, or the filmmaker, the auteur. It's a pretty recent construction in Western history in particular. So then, like, why is there classical music, so-called classical music, in the U.S.? Not to mention, why are there Asian Americans? I mean, I asked this. I taught a course last semester called Music Makers of Asian America, and that was like the first day. That's what I asked them, the students who were mostly Asian American in the class. Like, why are you here? Like, literally here. Why do we exist? period? Like, what's the rationale? Like, historically, how did these populations show up? And of course, it's very disparate. You know, my history is different from Korean American histories. It's different from Japanese American histories. It's different from Chinese American or Filipino American or Vietnamese American, say. All very different histories. I think the running theme is American imperialism. That's what ties it all together. That whole story also is motive, like one of the things that makes it go is white supremacy, which is a fantasy of continuity with Europe. So that's why there's classical music in the middle of that. Like, classical music gives us Americans, this sense of continuity with Europe's past. So why is all this canon showing up here? What does it have to do with this place? Nothing except that fantasy, which we're all partaking in and supporting, you know. So then, like, you know, for me, growing up, you know, my parents came in the 60s, 60 years ago, to the U.S. Around the time of the Immigration Act of 1965, they actually came here just before that, but that law kind of canonized, let's say, a certain kind of idea about good kinds of non-Western people belonging here. So it basically curated a new population of privileged and educated non-white people who were then used as a cudgel against black Americans. Look, they're doing great. Look at them, they don't need handouts, etc. The model minority myth that sort of looms in the middle of all this, and classical music has been a part of that too. So, meanwhile, like, I grew up in the 70s and 80s listening to Michael Jackson and Prince, and then Public Enemy and De La Soul, and so, and Thelonious Monk, and so really, like, my, you know, but I also grew up studying the Western canon on violin. In fact, my first instrument, which I played for 15 years and studied the aforementioned composer. I studied lots of all that. In fact, I tried to play some of the pieces that Hyeyung masterfully delivered to us today. So actually what it was that black music was a way for me to experience a different way of being an American, actually, that wasn't bound up with this idea of supremacy, actually, but instead critiqued it. And then when I was 20, I found myself living in Oakland, becoming the house pianist in this jam session that was led by a former Black Panther named Robert Porter, who he was 50 years older than me. I was 20, he was 70. And like, let me just inhabit that space in this jam session in this dive of a club in Oakland. So then through that, I found a very different way of being in music, among people, in community, in a way that didn't have any aspirations towards anything but mattering to each other and building community around that feeling of mattering to each other, making something that matters. I'll never forget that, like, one day I was, you know, we were playing some standard, and as, you know, he played the melody, then he handed it off to me, and I took a solo. Then at the end of my solo, he leaned over to me and said, "Vijay, man, you play like old people." And that was a compliment, because what it meant was that I was channeling something that spoke to him, you know. And so that was like how I became the artist that I am, was by being mentored and embraced and loved by Black elders who held space for me, and particularly black radicals who believed in that, you know? And that was so different from trying to get Western classical music correct. It was a very different way of being in music that, and then, you know, 10 or 15 years later, I was asked, they were like, hey, you make your own music, do you want to write for our string quartet? I'm like, or our wind quintet or something, you know. And so I got these opportunities then to sort of like re-enter that world, but from very different terms. As somebody whose music making had been not just informed, but formed by black radical aesthetics. And so that's kind of my way back into so-called classical music as someone who actually doesn't believe in it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So this is a perfect example of why we call this series Codemakers. One of the motivations for that name, there's an amazing, if any of you know the dance field in the States, the leading choreographer in hip hop for concert dance, main stage dance, is an amazing artist originally from Philly named Rennie Harris. And I used to tour with him, and every time after a show during Q&A, invariably Rennie would ask, why do we always have to be the ones to code switch? You know, why do we always have to learn the language of the center that we are marginalized from, that we're not allowed into to begin with? You know, so the idea being we're also in, you know, it's not the 19th or the 20th century, it's the early 21st century, and it's at a time when, you know, a lot of great and a lot of not so great things are happening, as they always have, but one, at least from my perspective, a great thing that's happening is that there is attention being paid to possibilities for not just those who have been marginalized, are still, or othered, but what it means to not simply decenter or decolonize, but to recenter. And so code making, you know, the idea. And I think your example, what you just described, is a great, you know, opening to that. I'm curious, I don't know if Hyeyung or Texu perhaps, you know, working from within, you know, this world. I mean, we're in a university right now, a Western university. We're in these structures. I love the way you talk about all of this, Vijay, and the fact that you teach at Harvard. The fact that you know, we're in a Bach festival and you're playing a well-tempered clavier. You know, these are examples of what it means to work within and without at the same time, and to reconfigure, to recode, yeah? So I don't know if you want to add to any of that, the type of example that Vijay came up with.
Or. I don't know if I can add to what Vijay came up with, but one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is literature. When I was growing up as a Korean American, I had rarely had any opportunity to engage in any kind of pop culture or literature that really had to do with my experience. So I think the pop culture that I consumed after moving to the States was K-pop, before it was global, before it became so famous. And that was a way for me to kind of connect to home. What I'm noticing right now, and in a more kind of public and kind of like this like big way, is the emergence of pop culture and also literature, and that is telling Asian American stories. You know, and I, you know, just even like I mean, Everything Everywhere All at Once, this movie that came out and was a big hit. And, so many like different, I have like 7 and 13-year-olds at home, daughters, and, so we've been consuming a lot of like different animations and like Turning Red, which is a story about, a Chinese American girl. And, there's like a series that came out on Disney Plus called Chang Can Dunk. And, so it's just so many like different ways and, literature to Asian American writers who are just writing about experiences that, I've gone through. And it's been so inspiring. And the question that I keep asking myself every time I'm watching and reading is just being grateful that these stories are coming back to me, and at the same time wondering, so what is Asian American culture in classical music? What is Korean American culture in classical music? How can I engage in this? How can I explore this? How can I tell my story? My immigrant story, just growing up here, like how can I tell the story as an artist? So the quartet I'm going to join, the Del Sol Quartet, they have this amazing project that they launched about 2 years ago called Angel Island Project. And they commissioned composer Hwang Ro to write an oratorio. It's about an hour-long piece. And it tells the story of Angel Island. I don't know if anybody has heard of Angel Island. I certainly, okay, some of you have. I never learned about it at school when I was growing up. I only learned about it just a few years ago. And it was a detention center off of San Francisco, an island where in the early part of 20th century, Chinese immigrants came through, and they were, sometimes detained there for months, if not years. And what they did was these Chinese immigrants, they carved poetry into the walls in Chinese. And, and sometimes, they're hopeful, but most of the times it was poetry that really helped them to process what was going on, their sadness, their pain at being detained and treated so terribly at this detention center. This oratorio tells the story of the Chinese immigrants who came through. So I think, just thinking about more opportunities, to create more opportunities to tell these stories and tell my story, tell all our stories. So I'm grateful that we're in a place where I could do that. Anyway.
So I have 2-3 thoughts about it. One is, again, I was a science major. I was good at it. In high school, I was the Korean prodigy of chemistry. I went to International Olympiad for chemistry, but nobody asked, oh, you are a Korean, but you are good at Western chemistry, right? Thinking about it, chemistry was developed in Europe first, right? Of course, there are some other parts who did similar things, but nobody questioned about it. But now we are doing music. I am being asked this question many, many times. So I just savor this question a lot. And when I became a composer, one of the topics I had in my mind is the beauty of everyday life, everyday experiences, mostly mundane things, because we have lots of other things too, but things like making coffee or breathing. And so many things can be music. And some presenter asked me, don't you want to be more artistic? And don't you want to present yourself more, I don't know, high art? And that puzzled me in a way. What is more important? Yeah? What are we talking about? Our life, everyday life of just ordinary people do not deserve any attention to be an art, right? I'm still struggling. I don't know the answer, but that's something I am trying to. And in terms of code switching, I grew up in a very homogeneous culture. And I was an oddball, but I had to hide myself all the time. So that was never an issue. And that's ingrained me. And I learned the composer should be something different. You have to be great. You have to present yourself more grandiose. I am not going to be like that. And in a way, I hope it's okay. And that's my statement about being different. And not that, because I'm just so used to switching my code. And I know this is probably against making code, but at the same time, this could be a code too, right? Just being who you are, flowing as who you are, and there might be a place for me.
So I want to give you folks a couple of minutes to also ask any questions. And just because we're recording this for posterity for our YouTube channel, this conversation, I'm just going to run the mic around. So if you don't mind speaking to the mic. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions? Yes.
I have a question for Vijay. Of the pieces that you played for us today, how improvisational were they, or how set in a compositional score are they? And do you know other pianists that play your works like you played today, or is the source of that music basically just coming from you and your improvisational concepts?
Thank you for asking. So one of my dear mentors and longtime collaborators is the great Wadada Leo Smith. He's a composer and trumpet player and very, very deep thinker. And we've done a lot of projects as a duo, a lot of material together. And I have to say that your question is a common one. I mean, in the sense that it is often asked, not just of me, but in the encounter between this world and that world, whatever those two worlds are, the world in which composition is put on a pedestal, and the world where the rest of the world, essentially, where music making is very different, might be very different, organized in very different ways. So once Mr. Smith, Wadada Leo Smith, and I were doing a duo concert in Chicago, and we had a pre-concert discussion somewhat like this, and the moderator asked essentially a version of your question: what percentage of what you're doing is improvised and what is composed? And Mr. Smith, who's, by the way, 30 years older than me, so he's 81, and an African-American man born in Leland, Mississippi, he turned to me, he goes, "Watch my back." Then he said into the mic, "Not too long ago, I picked up that word, improvisation, and I took it out into my backyard, and I beat it to death until there was nothing left but dust." So why, I'm not trying to be a jerk, I'm going to answer you, but what would prompt a man like him to say something like that? I believe that it is the fact that in the West, the word improvisation means zero value. It does not have any fixity in the eyes of the law. so therefore it does not accrue wealth in the way that the score does, like you said. And so we have tricked ourselves into believing that to the point that we always want to know. Was it an idea, or was it an idea written down? That's the distinction, right? And the written down one somehow matters more. All of which is to say, it's a lot of both of those things, I guess. What it is to say, this is a piece that I might do again, or this is a piece for tomorrow that someone else might do again. There are a lot of ways to do that. Some of it might be writing down note for note exactly what will happen. Another way is creating a scaffolding through which something like theme and variations might happen, but the variations are made new each time. Another might be a series of prompts or a series of raw materials with which to build. So what I did were all of those things, like very different, in different cases, different strategies for plotting the musical event and implementing it. A couple of them are recorded, or three of the four that I've done. If you heard the recording, you'd say, oh yeah, I think he did that one. Maybe it sounded a little different. Maybe it took a little longer this time. Maybe it was a little slower. Maybe it had a different shape, but something in it was the same, So it's like that.
Hi, thank you for an amazing afternoon. I actually was a bit curious about in the middle of your piece, the Bach plus piece. After the first Bach, I don't know whether you did it or it was in the composition, but you bend down, you take all these deep breaths.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering about the intention of that. And I got my own interpretation, but I'm now thinking, was it something like Vijay's relationship to the canon? If you see what I mean.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. I didn't describe what it was or what I was kind of thinking, before. And I think the audience, you can think whatever you want to. It's yours, and it's up to you to make your own narrative and story. But for me, in our conversations together, actually, Texu didn't give me any info when he first sent me the music, so I had to kind of come up with my own story. And the sensation of practicing Texu's piece for me was discomfort around the mouth, actually, because it evoked my memories of learning how to speak English, learning the language when I first came to the country, and just the discomfort of forming, syllables that were not familiar to me. And actually, the funny thing that I shared with Texu and Michael when we were discussing this was that, when I first came to the country, my aunts who were already here, they told me, you need to pick an English name because everybody will make fun of you if you don't. So I was like, I was 7 years old, and at that time, the only two English names that I knew were these doll names, Korean doll names, and one was Julie, and the other one was Mimi. And I was like, Mimi doesn't sound quite right. And I was at school, and they had to write down the name, and they're like, pick a name. I'm like, Julie? So I was known actually as Julie Yoon, as Roberta knows, right? Julie Yoon for a lot of my life. And then, about now, I can't remember how many years ago, 10 years ago, maybe more. I decided to actually drop that name and just go by my real name, which is Hyeyung. But the point was that Julie, the L sound, actually, there's no L sound in Korean. So when I first came to the country, I couldn't say my name. And every time somebody asked me what my name was, I was like, Julie. I was like so embarrassed to say it. So when I was trying to form words while playing, and there was a part where he asked me to go like this. And then that's what I felt like. I was like discomfort, I think Texu was, he told me about learning a language for the first time as a child, right? Like the beginning of something, So when I kind of added the movement in it, and I put myself into a fetal position because I wanted to portray, fetus, baby learning to talk, and he has me saying ba ba ba, these sounds, and then the breathing also, the beginning of life. So that's what I was thinking about when I was playing. Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah.
I just did a time check. Wait, I think we have time for one more. We have to let our crew go. Oh, we have one on the end. Okay, thanks.
This is the first time I've been at a talkback, or whatever you call them, and I want to thank you for your openness and your courage in sharing so much of yourselves. It's really quite beautiful. I think everyone appreciates that, really. And talking about breaking down canon, I think this is a wonderful way to do that, to blend them, to blend the individual with what's expected or what we carry in our heads from cultures, from this culture. So thank you again, just beautiful.
Thank you. So quickly, just to end our little time here, our conversation, I'm just curious from each of you, what's given we've just got a window onto sort of this larger and deeper reality, internally, externally, in the way that folks like these amazing artists get through everything. What's next, given all of that, and what would you like to be next? Maybe is one way to ask that. All of you.
The difference between what's next and what I would like to be next is so great.
Yeah, right. I was like, which one?
Yeah, little loaded question.
Well, what's next is, for me, a lot more music making. I just released. So one thing that I've been investigating a lot is with different collaborators is what one of them very elegantly called live composition, which is like, as an ensemble, what it is, and as you see, I'm not using the word improvisation on purpose, but what it is to actually build form together. So the aforementioned Wadada Leo Smith and I really do that. Like when we play live together, it's really, we bring materials and ideas to the occasion, and then we create something that is sort of meant to be its own whole event and its own, we basically, it is a piece, essentially. It's not, it's different from what is commonly called improvisation, even though it is also created in real time. So another such collaboration is with this vocalist named Aruj Aftab and a bassist named Shahzad Ismaili. the three of us made an album that just came out called Love in Exile, which, oh, thank you for listening. Thank you. I'm very happy and proud of it, and we are playing live quite a bit. We'll be moving around Europe, playing a bunch of concerts in May, and then some stuff in June in Canada, and later around the US, including probably not far from here, between now and October. And then I also have a trio project with the great Hyeyung Sol Yoon on drums and the great bassist Linda Mehan Oh. We released an album a couple of years ago called Uneasy, and we also recorded another one that'll be out probably in the winter called Compassion, so that'll be out soon. And I'm also, I get asked still, despite all my diatribes, to write orchestral music and chamber music and music for soloists. Recently premiered a cello concerto, and I'm working now on a piece for piano and string orchestra and another piece for percussion ensemble and a few more down the line. But yeah, so lots of things like that are next. What I would like to be next, gosh, that's, you know, I invoked some of the radical thinkers like Ambedkar, who himself was very influenced by, you know, I learned that he lived in the US for a short time in the 1910s and studied at Columbia University, not far from Harlem, and kind of coterminous with a lot of like revolutionary black thought in Harlem. So I started to think about how those dots connect, and thinking about the world that they imagined, the future that they imagined. And so what I would like to happen is for that to come true.
So I'm really excited to start string quartet life again. I took a break from, well, Chiara Quartet, we kind of came to an end at 2018, and then have 5 years to do other things, and now back to quartet life again, which is very exciting. And so the summer, yeah, I'm learning how to, basically being in a full-time string quartet, like, you know, people have said, like, it's like a marriage without any of the benefits. So, so it's really like that. It's like you work so closely with these people, and you have to like get to know them, not just their music making, but just as people, because you're always, you know, making music and working together. But like next week we'll be in Washington D.C. Doing a performance of Dust and Time, this piece, hour-long meditation that Huang Ro wrote. And then we'll also be playing the Angel Island Oratorio at one of the Smithsonian Asian, it's the Freer Museum. So we'll be there. And yeah, and we'll be in Hong Kong and Singapore, actually, talk about Asia and Asian, yeah, so in the summer. So we're looking forward to that. And yeah, I think what I would like for the future. The reason why I joined the Del Sol Quartet, they're lovely human beings, wonderful musicians. One thing the violist said to me, Charlton, who is Chinese American, he said that the Del Sol Quartet, you know, while so much, you know, maybe classical music in the United States and maybe, well, probably all over the world, is westward facing, what they want to do is face east, which I thought was an interesting idea. I think that there's a lot of possibility for that. When you face away from the West, and if you face to the East, you can find connections there that you may not have looked at before. So I'm excited to do that with them, yeah.
When it comes to the next performance, they are happening right now. My husband is an organist, and then he's performing A Piece of Mine in Worcester, and we live in San Diego. he's playing it right now. And then there's another cellist, Matt Heimovitz. Both Vijay and I wrote for him, and then Matt played Vijay's piece yesterday, and then he's playing my piece now in New York City. So that's next performance. Writing-wise, I'm writing clarinet piano piece, and also San Diego Symphony asked me to write a piece for the reopening of their concert hall. It went through a renovation, and then it's going to open on November 4th. I hope I'm correct. And so I'm writing for that occasion, a small fanfare for that, and another organ piece, and concerto for 4 violin, and another solo violin piece. So I'm full of violins at this point. And who I want to be. I'm still struggling with finding who I am, because I have a huge fear of missing out, because, well, you know, I never felt like I was in the center of music, and I'm always like following all the famous people who are making it, and you know, that comes with the idea that I don't give permission to myself about who I am. So I'm still struggling, and hopefully at some point I will get there.
Well, I have the feeling that if you ask most of the folks in this room, or maybe all the folks in this room, you've all made it. So thank you so much. And thank all of you. Thank you to the Bach Festival and Symposium, UMass, our crew, and thank you to the audience. It's been lovely together. Get home safe.